This video concerns quantifying collector efficiencies. And so we can run 60 colloids under perfect sink conditions that allow us to run these faster as long as we've determined in contact mode that the conditions support attachment so that perfect sink approximation can be used. So we change the contact mode, or we change the condition from contact mode to perfect sink. We use 60 colloids, and we can disable the simultaneous plots so that we're not generating the dashboard or the detailed plots, so that the simulations can also go faster. We can set the output directory such that the subfolder, we can change its name to reflect the limiting radius, the injection radius that we're going to use, in this case 1 micron. So that's what's set here in this GUI. Notice that when we run that simulation down below in the RHAP, that's the radius of the Happel collector, we've got 294 microns as the radius. So there's quite a large ratio between the radius of the collector, 294 microns, versus the injection radius that we're using, 1 micron. Okay? So a ratio of, in terms of area, is quite a lot larger. The ratio is almost 300 in terms of just the radii, but of course it's the square of those two that are the areas in which colloids would enter. And so we can examine what that simulation under that condition provides, and we see that all 60 introduced colloids attached. That's shown in the blue dots. Within this is a plot of the starting radius, so within that 1 micron radius, all 60 of those that were introduced attached, and that gives us a nominal eta, what we call eta RLEM of 1, right? 60 attached out of 60 introduced, that's 1, but that's not a useful metric because we have the other 393 micron radius extending out beyond this injection radius, which has larger area in which colloids would have been simulated. And so we have to account for that in the denominator, and so that gives us an actual eta, as you see down here in the single collector efficiency, of 1.1 times 10 to the minus fifth. And so that eta comes from that ratio. Okay, so we can recognize this and start to increase our RLEM so that we don't get an eta RLEM equal to 1, and so that we can better account for those colloids that would have entered the collector outside that limiting radius. So what that looks like in the globe figure is that you can see that all those colloids, and these are now the attached locations, but even though they were introduced into a 1 micron injection radius, they spread out a little bit, but not much, and all of them attached. So looking at the globe figure kind of puts this in perspective, showing further that that radius of injection is very small compared to the radius of the entire Happel collector. So we can increase that radius. We increase the radius to 3 microns. We change the output to reflect that so that the output directory, subdirectory, is got the same name, but now RLEM of 3 microns. And that allows us to run this loading simulation. We can see that we'll get results reasonably quickly because it's favorable conditions, perfect sink boundary. So we can look at the injection plane. Figure 1, so you can see all of them have attached so far. So clearly this is not a large enough injection radius, although we'll come back after allowing all 60 to run in case some of them do exit, but it's unlikely given that some of those initial attachments were on the outside of that injection radius. So now the simulation is finished with the 3 micron injection radius, and you can see that all of them attached. So that gives us an eta RLEM of nominally 1. That's too small. We need it to drop below 1, so we're going to increase it to 9. We'll change the output subdirectory to reflect that, changing that suffix from 3 to 9 microns. And we'll run that simulation. Just checking that it's recording those directories properly. It is. And so hit run loading simulation. And we should see this run rather rapidly, but we can, while that's running, look at the spreadsheet. So we got 60 out of 60 attached for this 3 micron radius. And so now that eta that's reported there has now increased from 1.5 times 10 to the minus fifth for the 1 micron radius to an eta, putting this in terms of scientific, to an eta of 1.3 times 10 to the minus fourth. Okay, so nearly an order of magnitude increase in eta just by increasing the limiting radius, even though the result was the same, that 60 out of 60 attached. So to get a more precise eta, we need to get some to exit. So we'll increase that injection radius further. Notice that the ratio of the area of the Happel collector relative to the area corresponding to the limiting radius was a factor of 67,000 for the 1 micron radius and decreased to a factor of 7,500 for the 3 micron radius. And that increased eta from 1.5 times 10 to the minus fifth to 1.3 times 10 to the minus fourth. So we get the 9 micron radius running. So far, we see that all of them have attached even in this 9 micron radius. We'll let this run. So how the spreadsheet works is that we input the grain radius, which, if I remember correctly, is 225 microns. We get a porosity of 0.35. So the the complement of the porosity is 0.65. That is the fraction of the volume taken up by the grain. And 1 minus that porosity to the 1/3 power gives you the ratio of the Happel radius to the grain radius, okay? And so by dividing the grain radius by that value, we can get the fluid envelope, the Happel radius and the fluid envelope radius. So we get those simply from the grain radius and the porosity. Having those values then allows us to get the ratio of those areas. That allows us to correct the eta R-lim to an actual eta. So now that simulation is complete. At 9 micron radius, we can look at the results, and once again, all of them attached within that limiting radius. What it looks like on the globe figure is they're spreading out. Their final locations are spreading out across the globe, but it's still too small of an injection radius to quantify eta. So we can get another simulation going at another factor of 3. We'll change that 9 micron injection radius to 27, and we'll change the output file accordingly to that over here in the subfolder name. Change that 9 to 27 and make sure that sticks, and we will run that loading simulation. Okay, so more have reported, and we can see that some are exiting, which is what we want. And notice that the ones that exit are on the periphery of the injection radius, a little farther away from the forward flow stagnation point. And now that the simulation is complete, we can see that the injection radius periphery has a significant number of exited individuals, and that significant number of attached individuals are in the interior of the injection radius. On the globe figure, you can see that the attached locations are spread across the forward, the front of the globe, the upstream side of the globe, and that there's a significant population exiting on the downstream side of the globe, which is also what we want. So we can put that value into the spreadsheet for the eta calculation. We got 24 attached out of 60, and that gives us a mismatch to the Happel GUI, which says there's 3 times 10 to the minus fourth, 3.3 times 10 to the minus fourth. That is our eta, corresponding to 24 out of 60 attaching. So I must have a little glitch in the spreadsheet. Looking for that here. I see that I have the wrong grain radius. It's actually 255. not 225, putting that value in. Now we'll correct everything so that for this, well, we're still mismatching. So we needed to update the R-lim, and now that that's at 27 microns, we get the correct ratio, and now we get the correct number, 3.3 times 10 to the minus 3 for eta, which matches our GUI. .3 times 10 to the minus 3 eta. Okay. So now we're getting realistic values of eta. We've got healthy populations both exiting and attaching. Notice that if we were running this in the contact mode, we could have provisional attachment, attach K4, as I described under unfavorable conditions in the detachment video. So let's update our injection radius to 81 microns. And let's change the output file accordingly. And run that loading simulation. So there's the finished simulation, and only 2 out of 60 attached. The rest exited. So we can update the spreadsheet, report 2 out of 60. We need a 81 micron radius. That gives us a factor of 13 of the area of the Happel collector versus the projected area of the Happel collector versus the injection radius. We can look at our plot now. We can open up the 81 micron injection radius plot just to show what that lobe figure looked like. If you don't have MATLAB, you can in fact do that from simply the GUI. And so go to the GUI and open existing figure, and it'll use the MATLAB runtime that's installed with the GUI, and go find that figure in your output. In my case, I put it under the output under users, under my ID, and the outputs are shown below as I directed from the GUI. And we can go to the 81 micron output and open up the Happel geometry figure. And as you can see in the globe plot, we have our 2 attachments, final locations, coming from an 81 micron radius, all the exits down in the rear flow stagnation zone shown there. So we can change our 81 microns to an additional factor of 3, which is going to be put at 243 microns. We can change the output file accordingly. And run that simulation, and that simulation is going to run extremely fast. Now it's running a healthy clip. Of course, if we didn't run this in MATLAB, if we ran this in Fortran, it would be even faster. We have that capability available, of course, and it's easily implemented on a parallel computer. But so is MATLAB in with the new single computer multiple core setups we can purchase for a few $1,000s. You can see that the command window on the lower left is reporting each colloid that exits or attaches. And it's looking quite likely that with this 243 micron injection radius, the random positioning of the entering colloids is such that none of them will be close enough to the forward flow stagnation point or axis to attach. At least for the 60 that are being injected here. You could of course run more of them, but it's easier just simply to limit the radius and not spend a bunch of time simulating trajectories that get nowhere near the surface. And this becomes especially important under unfavorable conditions. So the simulation is complete. You can see that none of them attached. Here is the globe figure for the 243 micron radius. You can see none attached, all exited at different radial distances from the rear flow stagnation axis. We can update the spreadsheet to reflect that. So we had 2 attached, of course, under the 81 micron radius. Now we can report that, nope, wrong one. 0 attached under the 243 micron radius. So having done some housekeeping on the figure to extend the x-axis to match this range of limiting radii, we can see that the ratio under 243 microns is only slightly larger, 1.5 times larger. The Happel area, projected area, is only 1.5 times larger than the injection radius area. We'll clean up the y-axis so that it doesn't run to negative numbers. So having done that, we can see that the eta rlim versus eta trend differently. Eta rlim moves from 1 down towards 0 as we increase the rlim, and the actual eta goes through a maximum, somewhere around 3 times 10 to the minus 3 for those limiting radii that have healthy populations of attached and exited colloids. So if you have any questions about this, feel free to contact us, but this is how one obtains a quantitative eta or collector efficiency.